Welcome back, Frisbee family. It's yours truly, Greggy Biscuits, here in the OTB Podcast studios. And I am happy to be welcomed and joined by the one and only number 58320 out of Baltimore. 6'3", 6'1" and a half.
An even 6'1".
6'1". Andrew Fish. Andrew, thanks for being here. Delicious.
Thanks. Good to be here. We're rocking a Spindrift raspberry lemonade.
Okay, so that's a sparkling water.
Strawberry lemonade. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we got a fizzy water.
Yeah, always
Crunchy water.
I'm pretty sure I drink more fizzy water than anybody else on tour. I can't prove it.
What's the science behind hydration? It's more hydrating than not water.
Certainly more than not water. I've got to imagine that like the carbon dioxide bubbles in it are hurting you a little bit because it's going to be mildly acidic because of that. Mm-hmm. But it beats drinking a beer in terms of hydration, at least.
Yes, true. But we have to compare the overall calorie content and wear and tear. Diet is so important out on the road. I do like to ask people what they like to eat in the mornings. As a professional disc golfer, how does your day start?
Sure. So
food wise,
yeah. When I'm going to the Disc Golf Pro Tour events, I don't eat at all before I get there, mm-hmm. and then I arrive at the player tent and I raid whatever stuff has been put out. Gummy bears. There's sometimes like off-brand crackers. The apples they get were clearly not the good ones. They went for the absolute bargain basement price. There's some very green bananas and just some candy. Every time I look at the Pro Tour player amenities tent mm-hmm. and the table of food that they have there, I am dead nuts certain that a 17-year-old was given their parents' Costco card and said, go buy X dollars worth of stuff.
We need snacks, Jimmy.
Yeah, we need snacks. And I, that kind of undermines the health initiatives that are being purported, since that's where players are warming up and cooling down and that sort of thing. But more seriously, like pretty much every morning is like yogurt, granola, fruit for me. Mm-hmm. I can no longer do the eat 6 donuts and go play and still feel good about it later. There was a time.
I'm going strong.
I will admit,
shout out to the Donut King of Stockton.
Oh yeah. I still have a severe weakness for breakfast biscuits, so inevitably I'm going to get suckered into that. It's important not to make it a pattern, though. And when I'm in Texas, I eat my body weight in kolaches.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like that comes up fairly often in your feed. The food travel log kind of regional fare. Do you feel like there is a biscuit line? You bring up breakfast sandwiches. Is there a biscuit line, like Mason-Dixon line, kind of geographically, if you will, for where's the biscuit tail off? And
it's definitely south of me. I don't think it goes a whole lot into Virginia even. Like North Carolina, South Carolina are the real hot spots for that because that's where Mr. Hardy was born. Right. I think he's buried like real close to the Myrtle Beach Open. I didn't go to his gravesite when I was down there.
I need to make a note of that. We want to circle back to gravesites, as you are wont to do.
I think the density of having like Biscuitville and Bojangles and Mrs. Winters doesn't really exist, but that was always one of my favorites when I was growing up. Mm-hmm. That's really prime in Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. And, there's a little bit of expansion with it. Wawa has stuff, but it's just bad. It's all just microwave.
I kind of bring it up on my last trip back after leaving USTGC in the Charlotte area. Eventually, it takes me a while to leave.
Yes, of course.
Places. In South Carolina, gas station biscuit, just really embarrassing is the word that comes to mind.
Yeah.
Obviously, like prepared in an offsite location, freeze dried or whatever, shipped in, presented as a biscuit sandwich.
Right. That goes in the same classification for me as a Walmart donut, where I'd rather not have it at all and I'd
Right.
rather it didn't exist because it's sullying the good name of actually good biscuits, good donuts, things that had some thought and care and love put into them,
I'm
even if there's still no true nutritional value.
I'm still thinking about writing an email, just to bring it to their attention. It's just the same thing you're talking about. It's shocking.
What is, to whom are you sending that email, and what effect are you hoping to have when you just say, "I'd rather not"?
Well,
Like, this is an
we need to
enormous
get
corporate
we need to
power
get
structure
yeah, they need
that
to
you're
get
going up against.
the product. I might put Larry Kirk on it, actually. He's like kind of my, corporate watchdog. And so just send Larry over there and just be like, "Hey, you can't be selling biscuits like this, guys, and have you heard about disc golf?" Because it would very quickly shift back to disc golf, I'm sure.
Almost certainly. That still, the person that you're speaking to is an hourly wage employee who is not paid enough to deal with this objection.
I think it's gonna be a
So
lot of
the
email.
yeah, yeah.
These days, after
Better
post-COVID,
yet,
it's so hard to get close, physically at a corporate campus.
yeah. I mean, 9/11.
Well, that's the real reason.
Yeah. Um,
It's the
is
elephant in
that
the
is
room,
that where you
great.
thought this podcast was going to go?
It's the elephant in the room.
A real turning point. So for a long time, my dream has been to buy the Washington Nationals and move them back to Montreal. Like, if I get fabulously wealthy, that is what I'm going to do.
Les Expos.
Yes, very much. And the problem is that they won in 2019, and that just like it probably doubled the franchise valuation immediately. And then we kind of know the market value because the Lerner family sold. Um, but maybe my next step is I need to buy the kind of convenience store or gas station, um, either corporate structure or numerous franchises thereof, and improve what they do by condensing what they do. Like, you don't have to have everything. You don't have
Well,
to be Wawa or Sheets, but let's do like three things really, really, really well instead of doing a million things at a very mediocre level.
coming out of Maryland, what is your hierarchy for gas stations? Is Wawa at the top?
I
Because they're not on the top of my list. They're fine.
I I'm just not that into gas station food as a whole. Um,
Well, I'm not saying it's something that we are necessarily into, but it's
right,
definitely
right, right.
something that we have to, absorb, if you will, perhaps. I mean, again, with enough
Uh,
planning, you can avoid it.
Annoyingly, it does become necessary because, like, I like food. I'm not a foodie by any stretch. Like, I'm not taking pictures. I'm not really researching where I'm going. Um, uh, but for the convenience, ugh, I'm bulking together on these long haul drives my gas and food stops. Like, I'm not going to take an extra 12 minutes when I have 12 hours to drive.
Right.
Um, so I think number one has to be Bucky's.
Right, which immediately calls into question, is it in the same category?
No, it's not. It's not. I'm convinced that Bucky's has like their own jurisdiction. You
Mhm.
know how like Disney and baseball stadiums and football stadiums have like their own jail.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah. A
I
police precinct? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm convinced that Bucky's has a jail. They have something back there
There's gotta be.
where it's extrajudicial. Like, the United States government has no real authority there.
Mhm.
I can't
Autonomous
prove
zone,
that,
yeah.
and I'm not. I feel like I'm not the type of character who's going to get into enough trouble at Bucky's to really find out. Um, yeah, so I think Bucky's is at the top of the list. I don't really weigh in on the Wawa Sheets debate,
Mhm.
and I don't understand the appeal of Royal Farms at all. You know Royal Farms?
That's northern?
It's very Maryland based, but it
Mhm.
has expanded a little bit,
I feel like I've
and
hit one, but maybe it didn't leave a huge impression.
on accident, I hope.
Yeah,
Um,
well, the van is showing a little bit of wear and tear.
sure, and I feel like all the nouns that you're using, like impression, wear, tear, are things that Royal Farms food could do to you. They advertise their world famous chicken, and it's bad. It's straight up bad. It's just a grease ball. Yes, I know fried chicken is in grease. There are so much better ways to do it, and so many better places to get it.
Again, gas station fried chicken, that could be a whole foodie tour to itself, I feel like. Growing up, spending a lot of time in Virginia, I feel like it's one of the more exceptional, options at the gas station is you could
Oh,
when you find the
yeah,
good fried
it
chicken.
certainly can be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Low
think
ceiling, high floor or no, high ceiling, low floor. Yeah,
yes, absolutely. It runs the full spectrum of quality and quantity.
for sure. Uh, we're getting into the off season, looking a little bit back at apparently it's still 2024. Uh, where do we how do you feel about the season? How's your off season kind of shaping up so far?
Those are big questions.
Big question. So you can take those, individually.
Um, let's see. I never found it in 2024.
Mhm.
I am way better than any of my play suggests, and at its core, it's like a confidence thing.
Mhm.
Um, where I would just like abruptly lose confidence in a shot or a couple shots per round.
Mhm.
And the margins are so narrow on the Disc Golf Pro Tour that you can't be doing that. Like you have to commit to every shot. And if you're just like selling a shot or two per round
Mhm.
at and getting nothing in return for it, and you throw out of bounds or you hit early in the fairway and it's only because you didn't believe, it's not a skill thing, that means that real quick you go from, a top 10 potential down to 25th potential. You do it in the second round, you've gone to 40th. You
Mhm.
do it again, and here you are chilling in 75th, and you're like, man, that I played pretty good, and I just didn't like I messed up three shots,
Right.
but I messed them up spectacularly.
Right.
Um, I feel like that's my narrative. Um, and those who are listening, if you got into disc golf in the last 3 years, you probably have no reason to take me seriously, because like you've never seen me on a leaderboard like that.
Mhm.
So it's for me, this off season is about rebuilding that confidence and
Mhm.
figuring out how to do that. I think what I've come to right now, and this is with the help of therapy, the help of talking with friends, and also just like not having to travel and play over the last few weeks has given me the opportunity to be more reflective and not just checking off boxes and checking off days until the next event. It's
Mhm.
a real relief to just take time and be in practice mode.
Mhm.
I think that where I've landed is that when I had an external structure of a job, um, disc golf was really fun. I didn't have to make money doing it,
Mhm.
but that the distance that I had from it as a hobby versus a profession enabled me to keep like a really broad scope. It enabled me to keep all of my big goals that I wanted to achieve. So, I'd get off work and I'd go to the gym. I'd
Mhm.
go to the course. I'd go for a run. Like every day I would do that because it was just part of the routine.
Mhm.
And I think over the last year in particular, I kind of lost sight of the big scope, the big goals that I'm trying to do,
Mhm.
and was doing it like every day was these little mini reflections of like, how am I doing today? What am I doing today to get better?
Mhm.
And on its surface, that mentality isn't bad. It's not a it's not something that should prevent me from getting better, but I think it invited so much comparison to like how I was feeling each day rather than am I doing what it takes to reach these big broad goals.
Mhm.
And I think in any field, whether it's athletics or your profession or parenting or
Mhm.
whatever creative venture you're doing, having access and understanding of both the micro goals, the micro steps that you're doing each day, and the macro big goal
Mhm.
are what it takes to stay enthused, to stay present in what you're doing. That now that's my perception, and I don't mean or need to project that onto anybody else, but
Mhm.
I think I think over the last couple of years, I've been way too trapped in the micro and not, you know, tying everything to what today felt like, today's performance,
Mhm.
rather than just kind of letting that daily performance happen,
Mhm.
putting in the effort and being mindful of reaching like the bigger, broader career scale goals.
And so would you say that comes down to just, like, mechanically, like, working and adjusting stuff too often? Like, reacting like you're saying, reacting on that recency basis of like, "Oh, this happened today, so I need to fix this right now." Kind of microanalyzing just strategy or both?
Um, y- yeah, I think so. So in the context of a tournament, like let's say I have a really good practice
Mhm.
or a couple good practice rounds and I've gotten my game plan together. And then I play my first round and I mess up one shot. And whether or not that's because of the confidence things that I alluded to earlier,
Mhm.
um, there's no reason to change a good round based on one bad shot. Um, and I feel like I would end up putting too much pressure on myself overnight or during warmups or the next day to like fix that one thing
Mhm.
instead of acknowledging that um,
There was all the stuff you did right.
yeah, like completely ignoring the 56 shots that went well and thinking about the two that went awry.
Mhm.
Um, I There are a couple ways to get better as as a disc golfer. You can raise your floor.
Mhm.
That's like balancing your forehand and backhand proficiency. That's getting a little bit better at putting.
Mhm.
You can raise your ceiling. You can learn to throw further. You can really hone in on like your one skill that you do better than anybody else and
Mhm.
that's all you focus on and you're going to make it work wherever.
Mhm.
The other way to do it is to tighten your bounds, to like make your margin of error or your range of errors small.
Mhm.
And there are appropriate times to practice and game plan using any of those strategies to like come up with the best way to score a round, a hole, a
Mhm.
tournament. Um, but at all times, you have to recognize that like your margin of error is your margin of error. It's going to happen. Like we cannot all hit our target perfectly every time. So if I miss 3 inches low on a 50 footer and I had a good plan for it, I read the
Mhm.
wind and I just missed it.
Mhm.
Well, it's 50 footer.
Right.
Um, that's going to happen. That's going to happen sometimes, like more often than not, maybe at 50 feet. Um, so
You just don't want that to leak over to the 20-footer.
exactly. Like there's no reason to change things that are working. And like I have a very analytical brain. I'm trained as an engineer. I worked for 8 years doing that. And when I'm when I'm playing at my best, I'm kind of just letting it happen. I'm letting my brain work on other problems
Mhm.
instead of overthinking the mechanical cues because there's not enough time to process between when you start a run up and when you release the disc
Mhm.
to mentally file consciously all of the things that have to happen for that to work.
Right.
Like even the players who like set their angle out in front of them, that's not the angle they're throwing. It's the idea of the angle,
Uh-huh.
but you the best players are creating a vision of what they want to do, a path, a break point, a starting point or a finishing point, and letting their subconscious brain solve that. They
Mhm.
find a durable mental image of what the shot is supposed to look like, and then they do it based on reps. Um, so for me, like going back to how do I feel about my season?
Mhm.
There would be entire tournaments. Like Jonesboro and Music City, I felt like I was on the cusp of something really, really great.
Mhm.
And I cashed at both of those, but had just kind of one stinker round in each.
Mhm.
And
That takes you out these days. It's yeah,
it does, it does.
yeah.
It like
At least from, like,
I
high finishes, yeah.
right. I think, you know, it's unfair to project like other rounds into the bad round or something because every player has that happen sometimes. But it's like if I had gotten the opportunity to, or if I had seized the opportunity and played as well in each round that I was playing, um, I could have been in the top 20. And as it's, I went into last season having had a tough off season. Like I traveled to Australia, and that was great. I had a really good time traveling around. It was a terrific mental reset.
Mhm.
But then I got back and I got sick for 2 weeks each time, twice before the season started.
Mm.
Like, I never got into the right gym routine. I never got into playing. I didn't get enough work done in my house. So it felt like all the time I was just like catching up. I was trying to recoup that lost time during the off season
Mhm.
or that I had missed during the off season. And as the deeper that hole becomes
Mhm.
throughout the year, the harder it is to reach that peak performance and
Right.
to turn the brain off and just like rely on the earlier successes that I had.
Mhm. And then we can talk a little bit about just how your touring has evolved. So fully on the road for how many seasons now?
I quit my day job in July 2022,
Mhm.
so this
J
was my second full season touring.
And do you anticipate, again, continuing full tour next year? Any
That's the plan as of now.
Lord willing.
I'm sorry.
I said Lord willing.
Uh, I'd say Bucky willing.
Yes.
Um,
All high, the beaver.
um,
The patron our
yeah,
patron saint of fuel.
fueled by beaver nuggets. So yeah, I've been discussing with sponsors. You know, I'll have that to reveal at some point. I'm not going to break news on this show. Come on.
No, we gotta save it for your podcast.
My podcast is not a news breaking entity either. If you want to break news, you can come on mine, and it will receive less than the hype than you think it should deserve.
It's
Um,
hey, you
so
know,
so as of now, yeah, it's my plan to continue on the Disc Golf Pro Tour. I'll have to apply for a tour card exemption with them, and the other sticking point might be course design projects that I have. So I lately have been bidding on course design projects and working
mhm,
with landscape architects or civil engineers who are doing like a larger part of the park and doing the disc golf consultation for them. So I'm putting together not just the field layout, but details and material specifications, sequence of construction,
mhm,
all the things that go into like real contracting jobs.
mhm.
In my opinion, that is a place that disc golf still dramatically needs to improve because so many courses get put in. Um, I, amateur
In
is
a
the
rush, yeah,
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 amateur is the word that occurs to me, but I don't mean amateur player. I mean by amateur designers, amateur constructors, people who don't have a real background in what they're doing and
mhm,
um, are prone to making mistakes, or things get put in by volunteers without the knowledge or consent of um, whatever municipality or county or whoever over should be overseeing the site.
mhm,
And when a township puts tennis courts in, they're spending like 40,000 to build each of those,
mhm,
and to do the subgrade right, to surface it, to maintain it. They also paid a designer to get the lighting structures and the chain link fence and the parking lot to make sure that all of that meets code and standards, so that it is acting as a capital investment to provide like 4 people
mhm,
per hour the ability to play. But because there is a dollar figure, because there is like visible work that's been tied to that township or county or whoever is going to put in the work to maintain it and to keep it looking good. I think that when we as disc golfers kind of overdo it on what volunteers are capable of maintaining long term,
Sure.
like, yeah, you might get work parties when a course is being built, but good luck getting them out there like
Regularly.
continuously after that
Right.
because they're going to want to play or they're going to want to move on to the next project. Um, so where I'm going right now is trying to get design contracts and interfacing with whoever's running the show from a project manager side
Mhm.
and ensure that they are getting their needs met and they are happy with the ultimate result so that they are treating their parks and the like in theory 24 to 48 people who can play a disc golf course per hour,
Mhm.
um, treating them as like useful numbers for that Rec and Parks mission. So as some of these projects get into the construction phase, I might have to uh, shorten my travel or not travel at all so that I can be on site to do construction oversight tasks to make sure that the clearing and limbing and fine grading and construction of tee pads, of basket anchors, of whatever is up to the standard that the plans and details have said that it should be.
Mhm. When did you first find you had an interest in course design, or has that kind of always been part of your appreciation of disc golf?
Um, I think I got introduced to it fairly early in my disc golf career.
Mhm.
So when I started playing in 2012 in Atlanta, Perkerson Park
Yep.
had been set up, geez, for a couple years by John Ritker and Barry Arnson and a few other guys weekly as a temporary course, and it would draw like 50 people to a league in Atlanta with hellish traffic. And they had just gotten
Shout out in
approval.
town Atlanta.
Yeah, dude. I love that in town Atlanta club. So they had just gotten approval to install that as a permanent course.
Okay.
And when I started playing, I think they had one basket location per hole. There were a couple holes that still hadn't been cut in or expanded. And I spent, geez, over 1,000 hours over about a year and a half when I was in and just out of grad school working on the course and
Mhm.
clearing privet, cleaning up trash, building structures and steps and whatever erosion control measures were necessary at the time, and working with course designer John Ritker to implement the rest of his vision.
Mhm.
And like I would always be peppering him with questions of like, why did you do this? And he'd say, well, if you moved it 2 feet to the left, people couldn't see it from the tee. Why did you leave this tree? Because I'm trying to force people to have to throw this more complicated shape.
Mhm.
Like, why are we clearing this out now? Well, because eventually I'm going to want to put a C pin back there. So we're gonna work on that now. I could see that there was. It's not just the static thing.
Mm.
That there's always the idea of growth, of realizing what the ultimate potential of land is.
Mhm.
And because of my engineering background, specifically with civil engineering, I ended up being routed into looking at development plans, looking at the way that subdivisions would be planned. Greg, if I told you to build a house right now, you you'd forget over half of the things that have to go into it.
Mhm.
Like because we're thinking, okay, four walls and then rooms, we need doors, we need windows, and like you're gonna forget the vent stack for that serves your plumbing.
Right.
You're gonna forget like all of these things that have been stacked up because of years and years and years of the way that development happens, the way that building codes are written. In disc golf, we don't need to make things that complicated. We
Mhm.
don't like we shouldn't want to get into permitting nightmares of
Mhm.
bureaucracy,
Mhm.
but I think there is a lot of room in being able to implement more standardized practices for spacing between holes, for what constitutes a good and fair fairway shape, or rule sets for particular holes.
Mhm.
So I've always had the interest, and then over the years took on a couple consultation jobs where a designer would ask me to look at what they had. And sometimes that was from like a playing perspective because they would want 1,000 rated player to go try to break the course.
Mhm.
Um, Other times they might ask me like, do do we need to take this tree or that tree? Or do I need to do something about this green? And I kind of just like kept taking notes mentally and physically. Like
Mhm.
I've got notebooks filled with stuff right now.
Mhm.
And because like playing disc golf cannot be a full-time job unless you're Gannon Burr and making 200K a year
Right.
in winnings alone, like let alone endorsements and guaranteed money from sponsors.
Mhm.
This is something that I have time and passion and interest in doing.
Right.
And I feel that with my background as well as experience at a high level as a player, I can blend a couple of things that like very few others in the disc golf or engineering world would be able to do.
Mhm. Do you, I guess I have, like, a sort of another two-part question where have you any other designers besides you said John Richter was there in Atlanta? Any other course designers that you kind of attribute some of the stylistic points or, technique or anything that you've model your style after? And then what would be your dream layout? What's your, like, your ideal kind of, course layout? I know it's gonna
Sure.
depend on land and everything, but you have sort of had, like, unlimited possibilities, what would it look like?
Yeah, there are a ton of caveats there. I feel like anytime I don't like talking to people, man.
Mm.
It stresses me out. Like I'm super introverted, but talking to people about like course design projects, that really gets me going.
Mhm.
So Adam Harris in New Jersey,
Okay.
designer of Stafford Woods, as well as several others in that region,
Mhm.
and John Bisco in Virginia,
Shout out Bisco.
um, and Greg Hosfeld in Florida. Those three, I think I've played probably four or five of their courses each,
Mhm.
and in every single one of them, I understand why they did what they did. I don't always agree with it,
Mhm.
but I understand why.
Mhm.
And like that's to me, that's a mark of good design. That it doesn't putting my own ego aside of like how I would do it doesn't mean that it's wrong. And in talking with each of them and like trying to drill in for like what constraints led you to this,
Mhm.
like what would you do differently? um some they'll admit that sometimes a hole is just a connector or it's a dud, or because they weren't allowed to cut trees above a certain diameter, it just doesn't work the way they hoped it would.
Mhm.
So I feel like I'm also trying to steal concepts or other ideas from numerous other designers. Like I really like John Houck's ability to utilize landing zones,
Mhm.
and like something like WR Jackson in its we'll say like initial iterations from
Okay.
like 2012 through 2017 or so,
Mhm.
the fairways were wide, but there weren't any fairway trees in them. If they were clustered and they were deliberately dividing fairways.
Mhm.
Undergrowth pretty much went up to the fairway or in the islands within the fairway because what you had there was wide enough. We don't have to make things super tight, but we need to have shapes. We need to emphasize landing zones. We need to emphasize like multi-shot holes that can't just be broken with power.
That's what I love about
So
Houck is how sometimes for 2 shots, you still haven't seen the basket.
sometimes, yeah.
Or sometimes for some of us, even more than 2 shots. But,
Hmm.
even in an ideal situation, you're throwing landing zone to landing zone to get to that spot where then you're making your approach.
Right. Um, and there are numerous other designers that I've spoken with at length. Like I'm hoping to have Leonard Muse on my podcast this winter. Um, man, I needed to play more courses while we were in Prince Edward Island because
Yeah.
like I'd have to wear shoes, but I'd want to hear the opinions of a barefoot man about like
Why?
what, yeah, what and why. Um,
Shout out Ben Smith
oh
at
yeah,
at Rose
like
Valley, at Kings Pine, at lots of those courses in the toughest feet, at least on that part of the maritime Canada.
probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, talking with Ben was fascinating because he he said he would talk about a hole And then I would bring up a phrase and he'd say, "Oh, that's why it works." I knew it worked, but I didn't understand why.
Mhm.
Um, and like I appreciate that. Oh man, what do I have a bee in here or something?
Uh,
The
and
hell is
Andrew
that? That's
fish
huge.
having a little bit of a interaction with a
How did
winged
it get in?
insect.
It's
What's the temperature out there? Is it winter?
it's in the high 40s, low 50s today, I
Okay.
think.
But hey,
Um,
they're still rooting around.
I guess. Um, I'm gonna studiously not panic about it. I think it's a wasp of some sort,
Well,
and
you're not allergic or anything, so it's probably fine, right?
when I was a child, I had to get rushed to the fire department. I've never had to use an EpiPen on myself, but
Uh,
like I got stung, I think on the ear, and it closed my throat up, which is like fucking terrifying when you're 4 years old.
oh yeah, panic ensued.
Yeah. But like I'm not that worried about it. I'll just shop back him later if he's still bumbling around and as I'm trying to go to bed.
But getting back to the wilderness of
I think we
Canada,
talked about the most important thing, the bee.
yeah, yeah.
Um, anyway, I really appreciate talking to designers who have a strong understanding of what they're trying to do, but also just have an implicit feel for what things could or should be,
Hmm.
and aren't just like making up obscure rules everywhere on their
Hmm.
course to add uh, like heavy air quotes, heavy sarcastic ass air quotes challenge
Hmm.
to what they're doing.
Well, I look forward to your conversation with Leonard because we're lucky enough to have him as our course designer there at OTB Open here in Stockton, and have an opportunity to play several of his courses now here in California. Uh, but learning a little bit more about his process. Recently inducted into the Disc Golf Hall of Fame with good reason, just very meticulous and very thoughtful, I feel like. So I feel like there might be like you said, a similar comparison of notes of being meticulous, of thinking about distances, of thinking about uh, distance of throwing and the range of the athletes and where we're going with disc golf. And um, I feel like he's done a good job at that particular property where he doesn't have a lot of elevation, and then he has the challenge of uh, designing on a pre-existing space that's a ball golf course, which in our sport sometimes comes with a little bit of a side eye. Um, I think he's done a good job of decontextualizing the ball golf and making a good, challenging disc golf course that he can take feedback on and expand and constrict and manipulate in a good way. You know.
Right, and he is lucky enough at Swenson to have a staff that's willing to not just go with exactly the flow of what's on the disc golf or on the ball golf course.
Hmm.
And he's got some dense stands uh, of woods that he can use as an obstacle to force you to go around it, and several ponds that are kind of have like a linear configuration, but have some coves in them. Like one big pond, you can only kind of play around that in a few different ways. Like you can
Hmm.
throw beside it and you can throw towards it. When that water has a different configuration, you can use that as like a less contrived out of bounds by pointing yourself at it from different distances or directions.
Hmm. Yeah, you got to use what's in front of you, right? Well,
Uh, yes, but
we're just
yes, because we don't have the budget to implement that for ourselves in most cases. Like
right.
whoever designed the golf course, I don't know who it is, didn't take the land that was there and say, okay, well, we're just going to plunk that in there. No,
No, they had
they
liberty.
built the lake. They graded in bunkers. They like imported sand to make the base for their greens. And we don't have to operate at that same scale of clear cutting and importing material, but I feel like somehow the found art aspect of what we're doing with disc golf right now
Hmm.
is a significant limitation to where championship level courses could or should be. So you asked like what is my dream course to design, I guess.
I guess
Um,
what are the parameters that you would put into 18 holes? Like, what would you want to see covered on a front nine, a back nine? How does it balance out uh, technicality versus yeah, I'm gonna say not openness, but options in terms of like restricting a player's because sometimes it's like, oh, you have multiple landing zones, but you have multiple ways of getting there, right? The equation balance out for you?
Sure. I remember hearing Steve Dodge a few years ago talk about how par 60 was what he thought was ideal
Hmm.
for disc golf. And I think I probably disagree with that to an extent
Hmm.
because putting is like, it's wildly overpowered in
Mm.
our game. Like it's almost too easy to put the disc in the basket unless there are some kind of obstructions or it's elevated or something.
Hmm.
And the best putters are like basically ignoring all of that shit from inside 40. Can I say shit?
Yeah, you can say whatever you want.
Can I say shit bird uncle?
Uh, is we
I'm,
have to
I'm
check
gonna
what we
I'm gonna
actually
have
we do need to check on that one. Yeah.
is it
I'm,
which
I'm
which
I'm being
which
told that's
word is the issue?
it's one word, right?
Uh
Shitbird uncle.
uncle. Yeah.
But
I'm gonna start
your shitbird uncle was saying something one day.
just I'm gonna keep adding like more and more onto this until you tell me it's been too much.
Uh,
Like I can say Cleveland, but if I start adding more Urban Dictionary appendages to that, it's a problem. Um, let's see. So I think that what we need to do
are you
is
a fan of changing the target?
I'm not opposed to it. The problem is that I haven't yet seen a smaller basket in any dimension
Hmm.
that catches good putts at the rate that it should. Like we
Hmm.
haven't if you roll a golf ball into the center of a cup at a reasonable speed, it always stays in there.
Hmm.
Like if you hit it too hard, it might lip out, or
Sure.
it might come out the bottom and then back out. If you hit it too soft and it doesn't get there, well, it's not going in. We're not operating on like on a green surface. We're operating in three dimensions, but there there has not yet been a disc golf basket that's designed that catches all of the putts that it should and none of the putts that it shouldn't. And I've thought about it, but I'm not enough of a like materials guy and to like be tweaking baskets in my garage or building myself.
Hmm.
I also don't have a garage, so that's another limitation. I haven't figured out like what would make that right. But if we shrink baskets and they catch the putts that they should, then I would be in favor of that, even if it's only implemented at test events or you know certain pro tour events.
Hmm.
Like we change other baskets, it doesn't it's not that big a deal. But we shouldn't just like broadly sweepingly change that for every course in the US.
Hmm.
There's 10,000 plus of those out there.
Right.
Um,
But it could be something on a at the pro tour level at least where it could be introduced.
yeah, yeah. I don't see a huge problem with that
Is it
aside from the logistics of getting there and then the inherent fairness of does the basket catch what it should.
at Maple Hill this year? They did release a prototype poleless basket. Did you get a shot at that? Did you get to see that?
I looked at it. I didn't putt on it.
Mhm. I like the idea of creating sides of the green. I feel like that's an interesting concept for course design.
Yeah,
The idea that like, okay, there is a green, but obviously a circle one area, but you don't want to always be in any part of it. Have 25 to 50, maybe more percent of it. Kind of more of a hazardous landing area rather than a wide open putt. And that's one thing they were achieving with that design is there was no center pole, but there was a pole that would block in one direction completely, basically a straight ahead putt
yeah, and
because of the support system it did have. Yeah.
I wouldn't even be opposed to being able to modify that or
Mhm.
request specifically that like additional sectors of the basket are blocked out.
Mhm. Yeah, like with a
Like
panel or something. Yeah.
right. So like what I keep harping on is like more specific landing zones, more complicated shapes, and directional specificity approaching greens is another thing that like I have been trying to implement in places that I'm looking to install courses.
Mhm.
And, on my dream property where, I'm not bound by time or budget to the
Mhm.
same extent, like I might be planting stuff the fifth day I'm out there when I know where I want this green to be, and
Mhm.
making it so that you have to land on this side of the basket, otherwise you're hosed.
Mhm.
Like USDGC does it, and it looks tacky because it's
It's not a
very
permanent
impermanent,
course. Yeah.
obviously fake stuff.
Yeah.
But I understand the spirit of why they're doing that sort of thing.
Mhm.
Um, I believe that having multi-shot holes, as long as they're like compelling and interesting, increases the replayability because, once you've figured out how to throw a par three, it's drive putt.
Yeah.
When you play a complicated par four, it's rare that you play it exactly the same way twice.
Right.
And that goes for all skill levels. Like an 825 golfer who plays a well designed 825 par four should be meeting it at an appropriate challenge, but also finding it interesting because like they have to play it differently. They
Mhm.
have to string together three good shots to take a birdie instead of just like one.
Right.
Um, I would love to have some topography. I would love to have some water features. I would say mostly wooded, but not entirely, because I think there is some value in having to like shift gears during a round
Mhm.
and throw the stand up hyzer flip in the woods and then immediately have to go throw power grip distance driver flex shot. That's the same idea that many golf designers use when they are bracketing long shots with short shots.
Mhm.
They're making you use a variety of clubs, uh, and the continued embrace of long and out of bounds as like the perception of what is challenging is another limitation to what the current state of disc golf course design is. Depending on who the intended user group of this course is,
Right.
when you were on my podcast, the Fish Golf Broadcast, quite possibly the greatest media empire ever assembled.
That's right, folks. Check out the Home and Home, Greggy Biscuits on the Andrew Fish Disc Golf Broadcast, and here we are on this podcast. You're watching it right now, but make sure you check that out. Go back to your podcast machine. Media Empire, go.
We were talking about like what constitutes a good vending area,
Right.
and like I added that like front and center to like w- what I'm looking at when designing a course. Like eventually I would love to have access to something that can operate at a pro tour, at a national tour, at a major level. How do we get all of the stakeholders on board for this? And it's by considering everything up front the way that like, a building code checklist does, an
Right.
inspection checklist does,
Mhm.
rather than frantically having to scramble 3 days before the tournament because, oh my God, we forgot where we're going to put our vendors.
Right.
Now, yeah, I'm not saying that happens at a pro tour event, but when the UCF Knights built their on-campus stadium for football, do you know what they forgot?
Uh, Parking.
No, no, it's
Yeah, that built-in locker
it's
rooms.
both more and less dumb than that. They forgot water fountains.
Mm.
So I think they were legally obligated to provide a minimum of 1 liter of water to all attendees to
Okay.
that first home football game until they were able to retrofit it. It's real dumb to build something and immediately have to retrofit it.
That was Big Water loved that though. Big bottled
Oh
water.
yeah, no doubt. I don't know who got that contract, but man, easy sale.
Sounds like an Aquafina to me.
A Culligan.
Uh, yeah, so a little bit of water, some elevation, mostly wooded. That checks out. What's your again, part of the debate there or the, I guess, conversation is, the the ideal dream pro tour course is maybe different from the ideal dream, disc golf, for a disc golfer, or
Yeah,
because again, we're not worried about spectators necessarily, but
right.
they should be, and they definitely have been in the past.
Yeah, there's an entirely different set of needs when you're accommodating like pro tour stuff because like media has to have
Hmm.
the same ability to access as players.
Yeah,
You need a warm up area. You need to get your volunteers in. You need to like have your
have a
like
signal. Yeah.
yeah. It's so many different things. So I don't think that my experience right now would justify like earning the bid for a contract to design a pro tour scale thing.
Hmm.
But I'm hoping that I can like build my experience and portfolio and shadow other designers, ask them like the why and what and lessons learned and get to the point where that is something that I'm not doing in 2 weeks. I'm spending like 2 years developing the plan for a place. Um,
I think that's what John Houck does, right? It's at least 3 weeks on the initial like walkthroughs, and then trips back and forth to tweak and monitor progress, like you're saying, like, oh, make sure the right trees are going, make sure the right trees are planned to be taken care of, or grading that has to happen, etc.
yeah, yeah, and I at some point I probably should talk to John about what his process is. I know that like I beat him on a bid for a course in Maryland,
Hmm.
and like on the merits of course design, he's got me by a mile. Like if that's the only if that's the only metric by which things are being judged, like I
Hmm.
would never beat John Houck in a bid.
Right.
But I'm not commanding the same hourly rate, and
Hmm.
I was local to the area, so my costs to get there are significantly less.
Right.
Um, yeah, so I think another thing to consider. I mentioned that at Swenson Park, the golf course designers were uh, they're not just working with what's already there and native. They are importing material. They're
Hmm.
doing mass grading and then fine grading to build the golf course. They're locating the clubhouse and the parking lot and the cart path and that sort of thing. I believe that a frontier for a championship level, as well as just like the ideally designed daily play disc golf course, involves some level of grading and involves some level of planting so that we get trees that are in the configuration that we want them to be, not just where they happened to be when we started.
Hmm.
Um, Maximizing the use of land doesn't necessarily have to limit us to what is already there. The problem is that running a bulldozer, an excavator, like that takes time and that takes effort and that takes
That's
experience and
resources. Yeah.
that takes money.
Yeah.
So that probably means that you either need the angel investor of all investors to help you build this,
Hmm.
or it means that we need to become more comfortable with the idea of pay to play. Eagles Crossing and Maple Hill and some others have been able to do this fairly successfully,
Hmm.
but we're kind of capped out at like $40 a round, or maybe 25 at Maple Hill, 5 or 10 at most local pay to play courses. I firmly believe that the accessibility of disc golf is one of the things that makes us most equipped to grow,
Hmm.
because once you have a set of discs, and if there aren't tee times, if there isn't a dress code, then like nominally we should all be ready to go play. And that's such a great selling point.
Right.
That said, in order to reach the full potential of some properties, there has to be a bigger initial investment in it, and maybe that has to be recouped in some way. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. There's sponsorship, there's media contracts and rights that can be bought for big events if they're held at a certain location. There's daily play, and then everywhere is going to have a pro shop, everywhere is going to have teachers, vendors, whatever.
When they're investing on that level, I mean, it's in their best interest to have that, infrastructure to generate some income.
Right.
Well,
So
I wanted to bring up Eagles Crossing. You've played it. You've been there.
nope,
Not yet.
nope.
Sabatis. You played that one up in Maine.
Yes, I think, did I?
I guess I don't know. I just saw it. Eagles Crossing specifically is one where they did have a budget, to like kind of really
Right.
and shape the land there and kind of build on the scale that we haven't seen previously. And I feel like Sabatis has a great infrastructure, not quite on the level of like kind of changing the topography so much. Just they still kind of utilize the natural terrain, I feel like. But
Yeah.
similar idea of we can curate this kind of disc golf destination that's so desirable that the average disc golfer will want to come and spend 30, 40, $50 a round or a day uh, to come play it. And it's not going to happen until someone values their property at that level, right? You kind of have to build it to see if people will come. Um, but it is
And
interesting. It's a slow
it's a
process, I feel like.
challenge
Yeah,
when you're in a place where a course that's 80% is good and close to there is free.
right.
Like that's a that's not a difficult choice except for the people who are traveling from out of town or have like a personal relationship with the property owner who is charging to play.
So I want to get back to Canada real quick because the only notes I wrote down for this interview were all the names of the hand pies at the hand pie company. But real quick, what is your favorite course? Maybe what favorite pro tour course, and then favorite course period.
Sure. I think it's hard to beat Northwood Black,
Hmm. Awesome.
not the Champions Cup layout. I hated that.
Hmm.
Um, there are things that I would do a little bit differently there, but they're relatively minor.
I remember just getting throttled by that course and loving it. It's like that's
Yeah,
what
and
and I like like it be challenged like that. I'm not a tour level player by any means, and so I shouldn't shoot that great at Northwood Black on the long, the hard layout. So,
yeah,
but it's super fun. It's super great to see the lines and the intention behind everything.
for sure, for
Yeah.
sure. And I must assure you that it doesn't matter how good you get, eventually you do get beat down by Northwood.
Mhm. Well, that's
Um,
reassuring.
yeah, I think my favorite course overall ever is Flyboy Aviation in Georgia. Private
Oh,
course.
okay.
I'm not sure how open it is currently, but it's not the most challenging. It's maybe not even the most scenic, but it is absolutely the most fun. And it's possible that like I played it at a perfect time when I was like enthusiastic and uh, just like loved everything about disc golf.
Mhm.
But now living 10 plus hours away from there and not having been in several years,
Mhm.
it's it just has so many fond memories for me that like I regard it as my favorite.
That's cool. I recently had the privilege of playing a couple courses in Georgia,
Okay.
Little Mulberry,
Ooh,
and
love it.
And Hobbs Farm, and so I was just thrilled playing both of those.
Okay. Hobbs was a Houck design, is a Houck design
Mhm.
that had a significant budget attached to it, and you can see what that did for it.
Mhm.
Little Mulberry. So that was put in by Planet Earth Designs. Ryan Fickle and Ryan Harris, love those guys out of Georgia. I worked for them doing a little bit of stuff, including on Little Mulberry right before they were able to put baskets in.
Mhm.
And there are two other folks that have been influences on like my design ideas
Okay.
because they were bidding things as design build and would uh, would really approach it from like a landscape architecture perspective. Like
Okay.
how do they make this visually appealing? How do they capture the experience? And yes, they are disc golfers,
Mhm.
but they also had the professional background that like they were looking at it through that lens as well. And in the same way that tennis players who come to disc golf or baseball players are able to leverage their experience to like get better quickly
Mhm.
at the sport of disc golf, people who have outside experience in various other things, and that might be event management, that might be landscape architecture, that might be engineering. Everybody who has a skill like that has potential to like shift or change how their local region views what is ideal.
Mhm. Yeah, and again, like, it goes back to when you have active clubs and different people participating and filling those roles, you can really have effective implementation, and you can get to that point where you, "Oh, we had volunteers put in the course, and we were able to maintain it because everyone had their passion behind what
Mhm.
they wanted to take care of. Some people wanted to be on the planning, some people wanted to be on the install, some people cared about, following up on it. So,
Yeah, for sure.
but yeah, Little Mulberry was totally fun. Love being in the woods, lots of nice trees, and yeah, fun, high quality golf.
Yeah,
Would play again. All right, Andrew, it's time for hand pie talk. Shout out to the hand pie company. We touched on this a little bit when we were there in Maple Hill, but I feel like it's good to have the list.
sure. I just read them off to me.
Well, first, did you want to try and stab at? Can you name? They have a hardcore six, like a core six hand pies there,
Yeah,
and then the roster goes beyond that. Did you want to kind of see if you could name as many of the six as possible?
I don't think I have a chance at this. I
They're
think I
not
can get
actually
like
the ones that I expected, except for two.
yeah, like PEI pasty,
Yep, it's on
curry
there.
chickpea.
Yep, it's 2 for 2. He's 2 for 2 on the hand pie.
But the thing is, I'm only remembering those because when Ella Hansen chimed in, like I edited that episode of my own podcast, and therefore I have heard it like 3 or 4 times.
Mhm, and those
Um,
those are drilled in.
is there a like shepherd's pie one?
There is, and I feel like it's maybe it's not the meat pie,
No, I
but
don't
it
remember.
would it be like the pork tortilla,
No, not
cinnamon
that
cloves, and and
one. Yeah,
potato?
just go ahead and read them
Okay,
off
here
to
we
me,
go.
and
So bacon
I'm gonna
cheeseburger is in the
salivate
core
here.
6.
Oh yeah,
Barbecue pulled pork,
give it
solid.
to me. It wasn't that
It's
good.
what you think it is. It has a long shelf life. I'll give it that.
That
Here's a personal favorite: beet corn and goat cheese.
Interesting. Yeah, I remember that one. I would like to advocate that the hand pie company allow me to franchise in like Georgia or something,
Mhm.
and we will make better barbecued pulled pork hand pies than you currently do.
So one advantage of moving or relocating or
Right.
expanding. Yeah. Uh, I just want them to franchise within maybe like a 10-foot radius of my body. So I guess here in the shop, here in the podcast studio would be great.
Do you think they'd be amenable to a food trailer and you can just like go double trailer?
We could receive a pallet and get a deep freeze and
Okay.
then just toss them in there when they get here. Okay,
Do you
chicken.
have the self control to eat those like no more than two a day for the winter?
They're
Or
just so dense, it'd be hard to say if I had unlimited access to unlimited ham pie.
right, like I'm not even allowed to keep cookies in the house most of the time
I know
because
I'm
like I'll just forget and eat all of them.
I mean, when I drive or have to be there, I'm good for minimum 2, probably at least. I mean, I could probably go what's your record for ham pies in a day?
3?
Yeah. I feel like 3 is reasonable until you start to get to some real that's a lot of calories. Not that I really care about that, but 6, I would say I would definitely tap out at 3 square meals of 2 ham pies each. Maybe 1 in the
Yeah.
morning and maybe like a dessert ham pie in the evening. Anyways, let's continue. We listed curried chickpea, PEI, pasty, uh, all day breakfast.
Yes, love that one.
Gotta love it with the maple sausage, apple pork bacon,
Okay,
braised beef and mozzarella on the list. I don't have any of the sweet hand pies on here, but they do exist as well.
sure.
Sweet potato and onion,
That one was good.
just essential, simple.
Mhm.
Chicken and broccoli. Now here we go. Maritime meat pie. I had to do that
Sure.
one
What
again.
do you remember what's in that one?
I think it's just meat. I think it's similar to the pulled pork. It's just a different braising application, a different marinade. I mentioned this earlier, but the pork tortilla. Oh no, it's French. Cinnamon, cloves, sage, and potato. That one's good. I really like
Sure.
that one.
On board.
Spicy black bean.
I like that one.
How long do you leave a ham pie in the bag? You start off, you eat one, you put one for later. I think we're good for what? 5 to 8 hours, depending on outside temperature.
I would think so. Like I'm not going to consult my food health inspection specialist friends,
No,
but
no.
like
Sound off in the comments if you think that's risky.
uh, don't leave it in a hot car. But I would say that a bag that is going back and forth between sun and shade, you're probably good for a full round.
Hmm.
Um, But I guess what I initially thought of your question was how long do you leave it in the bag? I Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to order it, and they're going to give it to me, and it's going to be molten on the inside.
Right.
And I'm going to try to eat it, and I'm going to go, opa, 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 and then I'm going to just spit it out into my hand or back onto the paper
Maybe
wrapping
wash
or
it down
something.
with some hot coffee.
Oh my god! And I remember they gave me coffee that I think I asked for milk in it or something, and they put a splash in there, and it was just like everything I have is so hot, and I want it so bad, and I can't do anything about it except wait.
Just
Um,
sit in the stiff Canadian breeze until it cools down.
yeah, and like that's the warm part of Canada.
For sure. At the warmest time of year.
Hmm.
Would recommend PEI. If you haven't been,
Highly,
folks, you
highly.
really disc golfing or not, come for the Anne of Green Gables, stay for Hillcrest Farms.
Go for the lighthouses. Um, the We went to two breweries. Both were pretty solid.
Yep. The food very high quality. Not a lot of options, but the options all good. It's quality over quantity.
Hmm.
Taco hand pie, the only hand pie which actually has the word hand pie in its name, and that's your list, as according to November 15th, 2024. I'm being told.
Right, sure. You're receiving this
I,
like a
I
TV
I've
anchor.
been thinking too much about the next year's season.
So your research department gave you taco hand pie in the same way that like people say ATM machine. Do you think that there's the tautology of having to repeat taco hand pie?
Right, exactly.
Like if it's the only one, the implication is that if you're going to say curry chickpea hand pie, then
Hmm.
you have to say taco hand pie hand pie.
That's the title of the dish, the item itself, which is
Hmm.
under the category hand pie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we got to the bottom of that.
Yeah. Good use of set theory. Thank you.
Andrew, what's next? What do the holidays have in store?
Um, I'm gonna be in Baltimore working on uh, my house. I have a 1930 row house. You can
Cool.
see some of the clutter behind me. I am in a room that I started working on in 2021, and it's kind of just like the staging area for everything that is supposed to be in a back bedroom or a linen closet that I'm working on mudding and drywalling and just like improving so that I can let it out while I'm on the road next year. I need somebody to go mow my lawn and bring in the mail and take out the trash on at regular intervals. And in order to do that, I need to make it look good.
A house sitter,
Well,
a friend,
yeah, something
a
like that.
renter, a tenant.
A, a tenant, yes. In addition to a media empire, I'm assembling a real estate empire very slowly.
Smart.
Um, yeah, I don't do a whole lot. Like the off season is time for me to find a routine,
Hmm.
and that's gym, that's throwing,
Do you like to
that's
stay
working on the house.
competitive, or do you like to kind of avoid the tournament circuit?
I I'm not currently signed up for anything the rest of the year,
Hmm.
and I ended up having to drop a couple events in the southeast. Um, I might play a couple local things, but nothing that is an overnight stay. I don't think.
Hmm.
I am trying to assemble several clinics in the Mid Atlantic, along with some other pros in the region. I think we taught 5 last year that had a total of about 110 attendees.
Great.
So if you are in Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, get in touch with me. I would love to set up a clinic at your local store, shop, store, or course, or wherever else, along with some other folks. Talk about forehands, backhands, putting, mental game, whatever you want to talk about. Um, I am going to try to go to the Disc East Expo up in Massachusetts in January. Would love to do some fish golf broadcast advertising, maybe a recording there. Would love to talk on any panels that they have, regardless of what the topic is, as long as it's sort of within my field of expertise.
Hmm.
I will be anxiously refreshing MLB trade rumors to see who's going to sign where and do the Braves have any shot at Juan Soto? Would that cripple the franchise if they committed $60 million a year to a defensively challenged, but Ted Williams otherwise prodigy. I've got, like I said, I've got a couple course design projects that I'm working on. If you have any leads on other course design that Old Fishy could be working on during the off season, let me know. Yeah, that's my off season. I'm doing everything I can to stay busy and productive, and I'm I like being home. Like
Hmm.
being on the road is alternately the most fun I've ever had and the least fun I've ever had. Um, because I, I'm not really a homebody. Like I do like going out and doing stuff,
Hmm.
but I miss the familiarity of it. And it's frustrating when, I can come home for 4 days, but day one is unload everything from the car, do laundry, like take care of whatever tasks I have to.
Hmm.
And then day four is
Put
pack the
back.
car, do the grocery shopping, like assemble the bag and the backups and whatever else. Man, it kind of just,
This year flew by, and I imagine as you were like continuing through your professional career, it's continues to get faster, right?
yeah,
Like,
it's
'cause
it's it's unrelenting,
yeah.
and there are always more tournaments and more high quality events to go to.
Mhm.
Not just tournaments, but things like the Disc East Expo,
Mhm.
things like fly marts, things like uh, signing events that are attached to Pro Tour stops.
Mhm.
Um, so it's exciting to see that level of growth and excitement that is sustained from the disc golf community. But it's also important for me to manage both the micro and the macro, like goals and like emotional levels throughout the year, so that you know it's it's sometimes tough to watch players at like Maple Hill just be dead-eyed inside because
Mhm.
all they want to do is get to USDGC and then go home.
Mhm.
And I have been trying to schedule myself so that, I take a week or two off in March or April. I take a week or two off in like June and July so
Mhm.
that hopefully I still do feel fresh around this time of year.
We call
And,
that load management. You're a 21st century athlete.
I am Joel Embiid,
Thank God for that. Okay,
Anthony Davis.
I have one, final question, and, what was the signi what was the most significant moment of the pro disc golf season, and why was it Colton Montgomery putting on all those shirts at the Alt Mart?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And how many shirts
sh-
was it? Yeah.
right. There's some pretty stiff competition here. You can talk about Niklas Antila and Evelina Salonen getting some of the signature wins from European players. You can talk about Gannon Burr's historic season, the apparent resurgence of Ricky Wysocki, but none of these compare to Colton Montgomery putting on 30 shirts
30,
in a,
folks.
in about 4.5 minutes, from smallest to largest, and just becoming a very, very stout, rotund, and warm man for a little
Just the most well-insulated man in Central Virginia by a
bit.
long shot. Love that energy, and thanks again for participating there, at the
Certainly.
Alt Mart. And yeah,
Well,
it was a beautiful moment, I think, that everyone could share.
oh, I quite agree. All right, we're gonna play a game.
Okay,
We
let's
might
do
play a
it.
couple games. You
All
ready?
right, and we're tossing the control over to Andrew now.
Okay. Okay. Greg, what do you think the longest Pro Tour or major MPO layout that we played this year was?
Ivy Hill.
You're correct. How many Gregs long is that? If we laid you down end to end, how many of you
He did the
were
math, folks.
were the whole distances? Not the entire walk,
Okay,
just the whole distances.
which I
How
don't
many
which I
Gregs?
don't remember. Was it? It's like 11,000 some feet? Or did they get to 12,000
Well,
feet?
I'm
I
not
have
going
to
to give you
guess.
the back of the envelope
I
math.
have to guess. So how
Like
many
you know
Gregs?
how tall you are. We need to
Right.
get how many of you there are.
So I guess it's plus or minus 5,000 Gregs.
Uh, eh, that would put you well within the margin of error on every single course.
Okay. Okay, so if we're gonna get a little bit closer, so we'll say 5650.
Okay, I have bad news.
Uh-oh.
5650 is more Greg's
Uh-huh.
than the 3 longest courses on tour.
Combined.
Correct.
Oh god. I went the wrong way.
5650 is more than 4 times the shortest courses played this year.
Okay, so I'm way above.
Yeah, the Ivy Hill was 11,794 feet long
Okay.
in its layout, which is
More like
approximately
1200 Gregs.
1,868 Gregs.
Okay. There you go.
Yeah. There were 7 states in the US that did not host an A tier in 2024.
Mm.
I will let you think, and I'm going to run downstairs and get the sheet of paper that I wrote these down on.
7 states that didn't have an A tier. Right. Yeah. I think it's got to be like the outliers, but I feel like Alaska had 1 A tier, but maybe that wasn't an A tier. Wyoming? No people? You got your Dakotas. Would Hawaii have an A tier? He's back.
Okay, everybody. I hope that Greg kept you entertained during that interlude.
As I slowly listed state names.
Yeah, really sprung 30 seconds of dead air on him.
Hey, but we didn't stop talking or muttering to ourselves. I said Alaska. I said Hawaii. I said Wyoming. I'm thinking Dakotas. I'm trying to think whether there's enough people to have A tiers, and I also think there's actually an A tier that happened in Alaska. So I may have already shot myself in the foot. But
Yeah, you did.
we need
You
7.
lost.
We need 7.
We need 7. Hawaii is correct.
Okay.
Wyoming is correct.
Okay. South Dakota, or no, let's say North Dakota, no A tiers.
North Dakota hosted North Dakota State Championships.
Gosh darn it. They would. In Alaska, you're telling me had an A tier.
Yeah, I think that was Meyer Lake or something like that.
That was maybe Zach went to that. Oh, let's say how about New Mexico?
New Mexico did not host an A tier in 2024.
Yes. Okay. So how many I have already 2 strikes. And I have 4.
3 strike. Well, I guess you eliminated one of the Dakotas for yourself. So 2 strikes currently.
Right. I'm thinking there has to be a South Dakota A tier. So
there was.
Yeah. So that's not a How about New Hampshire.
New Hampshire hosted the Hollows Fall Classic.
Yeah, they would. Hollows, fun course. Would play again. All right, I think I'm out.
Not to be confused with the Airborne Hollows in Minnesota.
Correct. Rhode Island?
Rhode Island did not host an A tier.
Let's go.
So you got 4.
And we know it's not certain states that have already been named.
Do you think Texas hosted one?
1 million? I do.
Yeah. Oh, okay. There's a freebie for you.
Yeah,
that's the middle square on the bingo card.
So we just eliminate states. Great. I was deliberating over Texas. It's true. How about Iowa? That's a bad answer because there's a freaking Des Moines. Yeah,
Not great.
Now I'm out.
Idaho hosted multiple A tiers, and I played in one of them.
Yeah, I should have checked that. All right, what are the answers?
Louisiana, Montana, and New Jersey are the 3 that you missed. So in total, Hawaii, Louisiana, Montana, New Jersey, New Mexico, Rhode Island, and Wyoming.
Interesting. New Jersey, I guess maybe I would have gotten to that one.
I mean, I think the big thing there is Stafford Open used to be their A tier, and
since things are in jeopardy a little bit,
yeah, like nobody's making long-term plans around Stafford Woods really from an organizational standpoint. There are a couple other courses in the state that could potentially host an A tier, but like it's a big pull to get that level of organization up and running, and as well as sustainable. Like you have to run a B tier 3 years or 3 years prior. You have to there's kind of a loose expectation of continuing to run an A tier afterwards. Montana, a little surprising since they hosted Zootown Open in 2023, which was a Pro Tour Silver event. And I think sometimes the Montana State Championships has been.
I was thinking Montana State. Yeah. Would have been like at least an A tier, but
Yeah, and
apparently
then
not.
New Mexico. I think Ruidoso is sometimes held an A tier, but I don't know enough about the club infrastructure to comment on that.
Shout out Grindstone in Ruidoso. Fun
All
track.
right. Do you want to play one more game?
Of course.
Okay. 29 states have hosted a national tour or disc golf pro tour event
Uh-huh.
since the NT series was started in 2001.
Uh-huh.
If I give you 5 guesses, do you think you can name the top 5 states that have held the greatest number of national tour and or pro tour events?
Since the early 2000s.
Yep.
Texas,
Texas is second with 20.
California.
California is first with 29, including the very first one, Golden State Classic.
Pennsylvania?
Ooh, that's going to be
Mm,
tough. Pennsylvania is
yeah,
way down the
way
list.
down
They've
the
only
list.
hosted 3.
Wow.
Blue Mountain, and I think 2
Okay,
Pittsburgh
so
Flying Disc Opens.
North Carolina. Or should I say
North
one of the
Carolina,
Carolinas?
North Carolina is kind of middle of the pack among the 29 that have. They have hosted 8.
Okay. And South Carolina.
This is Pro Tour and National Tour only. So
So
South Carolina is a
not US,
fat 0.
not USDGs. Okay.
That's always been a major.
Okay. Now I
Fat
understand.
0, dude.
Wisconsin?
Wisconsin, hang on, has hosted only 2.
Oh, farther on the
Yeah.
list also.
That they hosted Silver Cup in 2016, and I'm not certain what the other one was. I
So
think it may have
I guess
been
Kansas
its old
is
national
maybe
tour.
a big one that I'm missing.
Kansas has hosted 10. You're going to be real disappointed in yourself for the rest of these. Oregon, third with 19,
Uh-huh.
because BSF, Portland Open,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes
All
they're double dipping each year. And that BSF at least was almost always a staple on the national tour circuit.
Oregon's an easy one. Yeah.
Yep. Arizona, because the Memorial was always in there.
Mm-hmm.
And Massachusetts.
Because Maple Hill.
Yep. Yep. Sixth, I don't think you could have gotten with a bunch of guesses because
Florida.
it's Kentucky.
Okay.
So there
Bowling
was
Green.
Idlewild, and that's been happening for the last 7 or 8 years. But Bowling Green
Bowling Green.
championships were very frequently a national tour event in the early 2000s. And then Ohio, they kept hosting the Hambrick as a national tour, but that has never really been a part of the pro tour structure.
This is where I
So
needed to have phone a friend, and I call Steve Bro, and then maybe he has a better. I think he does better than me.
maybe, but he would have told you real quick. Oh no, Pennsylvania hasn't hosted nearly enough of it.
Yeah. That would have been definitely a guess he would not have made, but he probably
Yeah,
played a fair amount of those NTs and some other things too. So
yeah. So the last question I asked about which states did not host an A tier in 2024. That's kind of indicative of player and course density. Like
mm-hmm.
it's hard to get enough people in Rhode Island and enough courses
Right.
to build that up. But this one, man, there are some real surprises that you get a really really populated state like Washington that has some really good courses and a thriving disc golf scene, but it's only ever hosted one national tour event.
Hmm.
Uh, it's also weird how Pennsylvania only ever hosted 3.
Yeah, they had some. I
Anyway,
guess they had a major or two in there.
they did. Yep.
Yeah, but yeah, that's. And I would have thought that with all the disc golf and the population in North Carolina or South Carolina with the proximity to Winthrop and just that community around Charlotte, Rock Hill, so big.
And you also don't want to double dip. Like North Carolina, most of the representation on here is because of the Pro Tour Championships. I think it's been in North Carolina for 4 or 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
There was, I believe, when I was looking at this, a Dogwood Crosstown Classic in the early days of the National Tour Series. But I feel like because USDGC, yeah, like Innova is running that, but they're also relying on a whole lot of volunteer effort to get it there.
Hmm.
So if Greenville or Charleston or Columbia or wherever else in South Carolina is going to try to host an event at the scale of the national tour or pro tour, are they going to be able to get that up again? And then is the pro tour or whoever is awarding the bids for these going to be perceived as concentrating too much on a particular place? Like we already kind of get accusations of that for like Illinois, Michigan,
Hmm.
the Midwest getting too many events, but passing over Colorado and Montana and the entire Mountain Time Zone.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, at some level, me saying only national tour or pro tour and eliminating majors from this set is a little bit misleading on what the actual like level of interest and attention that's been paid to, say, South Carolina is.
Right. And it's, again, not, and then to anticipate like in growth going forward, I think those areas that have the hotbed kind of wide saturation of disc golf can continue to grow, actually, because as the populations just continue to grow in those places, they know it works, and it can just continue to happen with different parks and municipalities.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's some good data. That's some. It's revealing the holes in my disc golf experience, because I'm a noob. I'm just on a fast trajectory.
I'm an old guy now.
I mean, pro touring since 2013, or pro since 2013,
Sure.
started in 2012.
Yeah.
That's a run.
Yeah. It snuck up on me. I can't believe it's been that long.
A decade plus of anything.
Ready for a nap.
You're ready for mastery. That's what you got.
Not masters yet, but mastery.
Mastery. Andrew, thanks for joining us here
Sure, Greggy.
in the podcast studio here in Stockton. We're very happy to have you. And yeah, I'm glad it's Purple Friday and we're together. I didn't tell you
Yeah,
that
this
before it
is
started.
nice.
I just wore it. Stanley's been running the ones and twos. Shout out to Stanley. Anything you'd like to shout out here before we part ways?
Sure. First off, thanks for having me. If you enjoyed my presence on this podcast, you can find this voice as well as numerous other guests' voices on the Fish Golf Broadcast. I try to be weekly in season. Took a little bit of a break, but we'll be reviving fairly soon. You can also get fish discs at fishdiscgolf.com. And I would encourage you to look up Disc Golf Bra as well. And like I said, I've got course design, clinic opportunities. Get in touch with me and let's make something happen.
He's a businessman. He's got a lot of options, a lot of talents, and we appreciate you sharing your time with us today.
Certainly. Thank you.
So yeah, we'll catch you next time, and will we see you in Europe in 2025?
Well, that's the hope. Fishy's got to play well enough and manage finances well enough to justify it.
There we go. Well, fingers crossed, and best of luck in everything.
Thank you.
All right, folks, stay tuned to this feed. You will be getting more podcasts here in the off season, brought to you by yours truly. I'm signing off. Thanks to Stanley once again, and keep on slinging it.